Hello and welcome to the Youth Destiny Nucleus podcast, the hub for young minds seeking purpose, growth, and excellence in every facet. Get ready for inspiring conversations, insightful discussions, and practical advice to help you unlock your purpose and fulfill your potentials. Welcome back once again to the Youth Destiny Nucleus podcast. It's been a minute since we had our first podcast in January, and so we'll pick it up from there. And today we'll be looking at the effect of competition on students' well-being and academic excellence. The effect of competition on students' well-being and academic excellence. So if you're a student listening to the podcast right now, you want to make sure you sit tight. We're about to have a really interesting conversation. We want to see how to navigate through this issue of competition over competitiveness among students and how it influences our mental health and also how it helps us drive academic excellence. Without further ado, now let's get right into the first part of our discussion. Now, I want to start by looking at the role competition plays in driving academic excellence in medical school and to learning at all levels. Now, I'm speaking from the vantage point of a medical student. That's why it's tagged. The question is tagged as, what role do you think competition plays in driving academic excellence in medical school and to learning at all levels? First things first, I would like to begin by saying competition isn't always a bad thing. Competition has two sides. It's more or less like a double-edged sword. Of course, I'm speaking from my own vantage point. I'm sure everyone has their opinions about how this works, but I would advise that you listen to my argument. I feel like competition has two sides, and when competition is managed appropriately, you can see competition as an avenue for you to upgrade, for you to get better and improve yourself. For me, if you ask me, one of the driving forces of growth academically for me has been surrounding myself with people who are much better than me in diverse fields. And when I see their level of improvement, their level of development, their level of dedication to their academics, then I am pushed and to work harder. And by so doing, I improve myself. But then there is unhealthy competition. That type of competition, when you discover that whenever you're around a certain group of people, they're always talking down on you, making you feel less of yourself, making you depressed. In such an instance, competition is not really the best for you. So you want to make sure that you control the competition factor. There is healthy competition. That type of competition pushes you to become better at every level as a student. Whether you are a secondary school student listening, you want to make sure you surround yourself with students who are goal-driven, goal-oriented, who set goals and are aiming for the stars. That way, when you're in their clique, you would also become a goal-driven student, and their behaviors their work ethic can rub off on you and help you improve in diverse areas of your academic journey as a student. Now, that's the first question we'll be looking at. Now, let's move right into the second part of our discussion on this podcast. Now, some usually argue that competition in academics can lead to undue stress and negatively impact students' mental health. And so let's look at the pros and the cons of competition to students' overall well-being. I believe I've already touched on this partly in answering the first question. I said there is healthy competition and then there is unhealthy competition. This we have to relate this thing to the kind of friends we surround ourselves with. Because first things first, let's get this out of the way. My father always tells me that one thing with education is that education is a teamwork game. If you want to excel, you want to make the most of your time as a student at all levels, you want to make sure that you work as a team, because definitely there will be areas of your studies that are gray areas, but then there are other of your colleagues, other of your classmates who have a deep understanding, a deep sense of understanding of those areas. When you isolate yourself from them, then you continue to dwell in ignorance. But when you work as a team, it can help foster academic excellence. So there's healthy competition and then there's unhealthy competition. And let's relate this to the kind of friends we keep. And whether you like it or not, you cannot isolate yourself completely from people. No matter how dangerously introverted you are, you would have to hang around a few, at least on average, 5 friends that are in your inner circle. Now, how do we manage competition with reference to the kind of friends that we keep? I believe I've already touched on this previously, but let me just repeat myself for the sake of emphasis. You want to make sure that you surround yourself with friends who are goal-driven, but they are goal-driven, but they are friends who also encourage you and help bring out the best in you. That's the main point, and that's the crux of the discussion. Unhealthy competition spawns from surrounding yourself with friends who, of course, are goal driven. They are exceptional students, but then they always make you feel less of yourself. They make you feel like you are not good enough. They make you feel depressed. And so you want to make sure that you distance yourself. Keep such friends at arm's length. Surround yourself with goal driven, excellent students that are encouragers, friends that can pull you up, pick you up, and help you stay motivated with your studies. Let's move very quickly to the next part of our podcast today. The next question is, how does competition influence students' motivation and engagement in the learning process? Now, I would say it all depends on one's mindset. I remember I was privileged to speak with a few secondary school students, and I told them the importance of mindsets to one's progress in life generally. And I said that I can foretell someone's level of greatness or failure just by seeing how they respond and react to failure. If you're one that is put off by failure, if you experience failure, let's say you write a test, a biology test, and because you score 2 over 20, and then you give up as a result of that failure, you feel discouraged, and then you don't read for the next test, and your scores continue to go from bad to worse, then that's an indication that greatness might not just be for you. You see, one thing with great people is that they handle failure, they see failure as an opportunity for growth. So if your aspiration is to become great, if you want to reach the very top of your game as a student, you want to make sure that you work on your mindset. For me, I would say I've developed my mindset to an extent that when I see my colleagues, I'm not looking at this from the negative standpoint now. As long as this mindset helps you grow, as long as it helps you develop, then it falls under healthy competition. So whenever I see my colleagues doing much better than myself in probably some courses, then the next move is not for me to get jealous and begin to covet their what their results are. The next step is I begin to look inwards. What am I not doing that my colleagues are doing that is making them excel while I'm struggling? And then I look inwards. I have some sense of introspection. I look at those areas that I'm not serious and I try to brush up on them and I develop myself. So I would say for me, the healthy competition part helps me stay motivated. If I hang around friends that are not as good as I am or that are much worse than myself, then the motivation might not be there. So I surround myself with goal-driven, goal-oriented friends. And so when I see their level of development, their level of growth, their work ethic, their level of discipline when it comes to their academics, I am motivated to keep pressing on. And so I get better as a result. Let's move to the next question on our schedule for today. The next question is, what are your thoughts on the impact of standardized testing and rankings on academic competition? And do you think these systems promote healthy competition, or do they create unnecessary pressure and stress? Now, I feel like this is a really interesting question. I would say for me, it depends on the mindset. It depends on the tutor. It depends on the teacher. I've had the privilege of teaching secondary school students for some time on a consultancy basis. And one thing I've always tried to do is, of course, our standardized testing system. The system of testing students is a standardized testing system and ranking system where you have your first position, you have your second position, and then you have your last position. Of course, this type of system is designed to promote competition, intentionally designed to promote competition. And I feel like it is healthy in a sense. And I already explained why that is the case. It now boils down to the tutors, it boils down to the lecturers and the teachers to make sure they don't push this competition factor to the extremes and then begin to make those students that are struggling academically to feel less of themselves, to feel inadequate. Unfortunately, this is one factor we experience in medical school. The lecturers are not smiling all the time, to the end that they want to push you to work hard and be the best future medical doctor you can be. Sometimes they say some harsh words and they say some kind of harsh stuff that can make you think less of yourself and make you demotivated at times. So I believe the teachers and the tutors bear the brunt of this responsibility when it comes to managing our standardized testing and ranking system. You want to make sure that you strike a balance between making your students competitive so they can get better, and then making them feel less of themselves. Next question. The next question is, let's discuss on the cultural or societal factors that may influence how competition is perceived and valued in the academic settings. Now, I believe this whole thing begins at the family level. And unfortunately, most parents tend to lean towards this over competitive kind of mindset right from when you're growing up. Your father and your mother will keep on comparing you with your siblings that are doing much better than you academically, and even outside academics. Statement like, can't you see your brother, how well behaved your brother is? Are you not a son from this family? Stuffs like that. I understand that most times parents say this from a well-meaning standpoint, but sometimes it can have a negative consequence on the child's mindset, the child's perspectives of themselves. So I believe culturally and the society in general tends to foster this over competitiveness, and it is not always a good thing. So at the family level, we want to make sure that we are all units of the family. Our parents are also listening to the podcast, but they are doing their best to make sure they raise us in the way that will grow up to become remarkable, exceptional people. But sometimes our parents should endeavor to make sure they don't push uh, the over competitive culture, because it can have negative consequences on us. And we, as older siblings, younger siblings, you want to make sure that you don't overemphasize. I'm saying overemphasize. I know that competition, in a sense, like I've already discussed, can help you become better in different areas of your life. But the moment you overdo this, then it can have negative impact on one's mental health, especially. Now let's move right. We are gradually coming to the end of our discussion on this podcast. Let's move right to the next question. And the next question is: do you think competition in academic settings should be completely eradicated? If no, then how can educators and mentors encourage students to view competition as a positive force rather than a source of anxiety or stress? For me, I believe words are powerful. I mentioned earlier that I've had the privilege of teaching. I've had the privilege of giving talks at different skills to secondary school students, and so far so good. I've had a reasonable level of success. I've had a reasonable level of impact, and so this is how I manage mine. I just make sure I strike a balance, because I'm someone that understands the importance, the benefit of competition, but then you don't overdo it. Sometimes when I give a quiz, for example, and then I see that the boys, sometimes my quizzes are like between the boys and girls, and when I see that the boys, like, they outperform the girls to an extreme level, like let's say the score is like 22, what I do in such instances is that I just cancel the quiz. At the end of the quiz, I say I'm not going to announce the score line. Everyone made a decent attempt, and in the next class or the next day, I would make sure I announce who the winner is. And sometimes I go on to never mention who the winner is. So the essence is for them to learn and to grow. So when you talk down on the losers, you make them feel less of themselves. They are already at a bad place emotionally, psychologically, and even academically. So you want to make sure you don't overstretch it. In that instance, you can push them down a path of depression and anxiety. Next question is: what are some potential drawbacks or limitations of emphasizing competition in academic settings? Of course, the major drawback is with our mental health. As a medical student, I know what it means, right? And I'm sure the medical student listening can tell how negatively this over competitive culture has played on their mental health, and sometimes it can even go as far as leading to clinical depression and anxiety. And we've heard of instances where students unfortunately become suicidal, and in the long run they take their lives. So these are some of the drawbacks and limitations of emphasizing or overemphasizing competition in academic setting. Now, moving on to the final question of our podcast: how can medical students and students generally at all levels shield themselves from the negative impact of excessive competition? For me, I would say we have to work on our mindsets. I'm talking not just medical students, even the engineering student, the law students, as long as you're a student, the secondary school students, even the primary school students. Perhaps you are listening to our podcast together with your big brother or your big sister who is in the university. Our podcast also applies to you somehow in one way or the other. So I would say work on your mindset, understand who you are, understand yourself, understand your goals. First things first, you should be goal driven and goal oriented. Have a vision for yourself as a student. When you have a vision for yourself, it will be very difficult for someone else. We call it oppression in medical school. It will be very difficult for someone to oppress you, because you already know who you are. You understand that you are working towards being an exceptional person. I would recommend, as long as you're part of the YDN family, you should be aiming towards becoming exceptional in every sphere. So your goals should reflect how visionary you are. And if you have already set extremely high goals for yourself, then you will not be oppressed by anybody. You'll be much harder on yourself than anyone else possibly can. So that's the trick for me. I am working constantly to improve myself academically, spiritually, in terms of my talents. So I don't wait for you to show me that you are doing well for me to set high standards for myself. I believe that's the key. Set goals for yourself.